Welcome to Talent Attraction and Development, the latest edition of MEED Market Talk. My name is Richard Thompson and I am the Editorial Director of MEED. One of the biggest challenges facing companies anywhere in the world, but particularly in the Gulf region, is attracting and retaining talent. And being an employer of choice is one of the most powerful ways that you can ensure that you can get the best talent and keep the best talent. Of course, there are many aspects to being an employer of choice: the salary packages, the benefits, the location of your office, the reputation of your brand. But one of the most recognised areas of being an employer of choice is in your HR policies, particularly around policies covering equal opportunities. So today we're going to look at the importance of equality, diversity and inclusion policies within a company, and how strong EDI policies are not only good for your people, but good for your business and good for your brand. And I'm delighted to be joined today by a panel of leading experts to discuss this absolutely critical topic. Chris Bernard is the Global People Recruitment and Equality, Diversity and Inclusivity Director for HKA. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Richard.
Haroon Niazi is a partner at HKA and also the head of the Middle East for HKA. Welcome, Haroon. And Nurul Sabri is a senior consultant at HKA based in Doha and also with 14 years of professional experience in the Gulf, both in the UAE and in Qatar. Welcome to all three of you. Thank you very much for your time today. Chris, if I can come to you first. So, Global People Recruitment and Equality, Diversity and Inclusivity Director, that's a big title. What does that involve? What is your role and what are the sort of key challenges for you?
Thank you, Richard. It's quite a critical role for us as a growing business, and our business is about people and our clients. So therefore, my role is about attracting and getting across the door the best people, brilliant people into our business, and also retaining our brilliant people in the business.
And what does that mean, writing the rules that everyone has to follow, or is it about you having getting to know the key people in your organisation and making them aware of what they can do? Is it about relationships or is it about rules?
It's absolutely about both, and the rules are more around to help with attitudes, behaviours, so that we as a business and our culture is inclusive, and that will ensure that we attract the best people into our business. Most very experienced talent want to know that they're joining a business that's inclusive, where they can grow, where they can prosper, where their careers can flourish. So it's really important that we as a business, we exemplify those attitudes and those behaviours to firstly attract those people and obviously to keep them and retain them within our business, and that will help support our growth and profitability.
Very good, thank you. Now, Haroon, why are we talking about this today? You know, there are so many things going on in the world. You know, we're worrying about the rising cost of living. There is COVID, of course. We're still in the pandemic and many other sort of economic uncertainties. So why is this issue, equality, diversity, and inclusivity, why is this a critical factor today?
I think, Richard, it's always been important. It's always been important. It's how do companies really treat that level of importance? And for us, as Chris mentioned, it is a critical issue. So it's bringing these important topical issues to a head. And when I say bring them to a head, I mean how we work internally as a business, and really how do we create that culture? Chris mentioned rules. Rules are important, but if the culture in an organization is right, you find that people play by the rules without even realizing that rules are there.
Now, you are a partner in HK, but you're also head of the Middle East, and the Middle East is obviously it's a region with its own characteristics, its own trends. What stands out in this region as being particular that might be different from, say, in Europe or in North America?
I think if you look at the region and how it's changed over the last few years, you see a region that is on a change trajectory, a region that is embracing change, particularly in terms of diversity. And if you look throughout, whether it's Qatar, whether it's Saudi Arabia or here in the UAE, that the level of change that is quite visible is frankly amazing. And I think you see how the private sector and the public sector is embracing change in different ways. in different ways, and every business has got its own challenge in terms of ED&I, and they're tackling it differently.
Now, Nurul, you are a senior consultant with HKA, you're a quantity surveyor, and you've got 14 years experience in the construction industry in the Gulf, both in the UAE and in Qatar. So you've been there, seen that, done that. What, for you, are the biggest challenges facing women in construction in the Gulf region?
I think it's no secret that women continue facing massive challenges in any fields. But for women working in the construction industry, the biggest hurdle would be stereotypes or perceptions about women. They were always not being taken seriously, and from time to time, their technical knowledge and qualifications are being questioned. Women also tend to be undervalued of their abilities. Women, I've come across a study which report that there are a major percentage of women feels that they were being passed over roles because of their gender.
And do you think that is conscious bias, because you've got males in senior positions, they promote someone similar to themselves, or do you think it's unconscious? Do you think that people want to do the right thing but just unconsciously make assumptions about a woman in construction?
I think my personal opinion is unconscious, because as I mentioned earlier, it's about perception or stereotypes about women. So that's why it is important for us to tackle this unconscious bias.
And I would just add, Richard, I think it's all about breaking down barriers. I mean, I would say, to Nurul's point, probably conscious bias would definitely exist as well. I think we have to accept that it exists, but we have a responsibility to break down those barriers. And I think if we accept, as leaders in the region, that we have that responsibility to break down those barriers, we will see improvement.
So when you say you think that conscious bias might exist, what you're saying is that people knowingly will have a prejudice, and they might even talk about it. I mean, is it something you've seen?
I think to be fair, Richard, the point I mentioned before, the region is changing. So if you look at the amount of change in the last few years in particular, change has an impact on people. And that's why when I say conscious bias, you're looking at the working environment that existed in this region over the last 50 years. That will take time to change. And as that change comes through, there will be an element of conscious bias that remains in many organizations. I'd like to think at HKA it's not there. And it's important that we strike that out wherever we see conscious bias. And you spoke to me about an example. I mean, if you look out in the industry at the moment, if we look at some of the major contractors in the industry, if we look at major employers in the region, and you look visibly the level of diversity in the businesses, I think just visibly and optically looking into a business, we don't see representation the way we would like to see it.
Okay, Chris, if I could come to you on this point of conscious and unconscious bias. Now, it seems to me that conscious bias, as Haroon has just been talking about, is something that we can identify and work with. But unconscious bias is much more subtle and more difficult. Is this one of the key challenges you think that we face?
It absolutely is one of the key challenges. And as a business and an employer that has a commitment to creating an inclusive environment, we are taking positive action to address that. And one way that we have done that, we've actually polled all of our colleagues very recently. So we conducted a survey, in fact, a very first Equality, Diversity and Inclusion survey. And our colleagues actually fed back to us, amongst a number of other things, that they would value more learning and development, specifically in ED&I. And unconscious bias did come out of this survey, but we have developed a program internally that all colleagues have been able to attend and just develop, if you like, the skills and the knowledge and an awareness about unconscious bias, because we all have an unconscious bias. I know I've got an unconscious bias. And once you are aware, then you take active steps to either eradicate the bias or at least try and turn it into more of a positive situation. So that's really, really important.
I think, Chris, just to add, I mean, the poll that we did was anonymous. And it is interesting reading the feedback and the comments where colleagues were really open about feedback, constructive feedback. And I think the onus is on organisations such as us really listening to what colleagues and people have to say and doing something about it. Because it's all well and good doing a poll, but it's what do you do with that data? How can you take that data? How can you learn from what colleagues are saying? And how can you implement change and improve processes, procedures to really take on board what people think?
And Chris, just on that poll, I mean, what can you give us any sort of headlines from? Did you notice different perceptions from men versus women, or different geographies versus different offices versus other offices? Are there some key takeaways?
So absolutely, some of the key takeaways were we had a particular question where we polled our colleagues, how do they feel HKA is embracing the principles of ED&I? And actually the scoring was much higher than any of us expected, because it's the first poll, and you as Haroon has said, we gave our colleagues the opportunity to do this completely anonymously. So, and we were prepared. We started to put things like learning and development in place, and actually the score was about 8 out of 10, which is a really good base to build on. Yes, there's room for improvement. We're not totally there yet, but 8 out of 10, our colleagues believe that there is a commitment to creating an inclusive environment and creating opportunities for everybody and leading on equality. So that's a very good base for us to build upon. Obviously, the next time we want that to be 9. It has to be 9 or indeed a 10 out of 10.
Very good. Okay. Nurul, if I can come back to you. So in this region, the construction industry and the oil and gas industry, two of the biggest sectors. Now, those are both famously slow to change, and they're also traditionally very male dominated. Is that reputation for those industries, is that fair? Are they slow to change? Are they male dominated? And sort of follow up, are you seeing change in those industries?
Just to follow on what Haroon mentioned earlier, in terms of the awareness within the region, we've seen significant changes in terms of awareness of the ED&I within the region. And as Haroon mentioned, that there is a shift in the region. Although I do agree that although the changes is often slow, but we see changes. So there are still much that needs to be done, but it doesn't mean that it's not improving.
And when you mentioned earlier that one of the biggest challenges for women is the sort of the unconscious bias in terms of promotion, women being passed over. So you've just mentioned that things are changing. I mean, is it too early to say that we're now seeing women getting those promotions, or is it not yet possible?
I think what I can say about that is what I mentioned about the changes is in terms of we've seen that many organizations strive to include the ED&I aspect, the equality, diversity and inclusion aspect in their organization. So they're aware that on a wider scale, the importance of female empowerment and female inclusion. So once this concept is being established in the company, so we can see more and more female probably going into the leadership position.
Okay, thank you. Now, Haroon, one of the, let's call it, employment characteristics of this region is the drive to get away from the dependence on expats and to localise the workforce as much as possible. So firstly, how does the localisation drive affect business, in terms of, are the skills out there, and is that, that's always talked about, but where does ED&I fit into the localisation drive?
For me, it's all about creating opportunity. Whether you're an expat or a local, it's about creating opportunities for people within the business environment. And it's about looking over and beyond what the localization rules are and truly embracing localization. Because if you're embracing localization from a tick box perspective, or gender diversity from a tick box perspective, you will not achieve what the goal of the business is. The tick box will remain there, and it'll always be a tick box.
Well, it's an interesting point, isn't it? Because in my experience, many of the international companies, they do talk about localization quotas as a tick box exercise, and in different markets it's different. So yeah, why is this going to be any different?
For me, the difference is, at the end of the day, when you're bringing talent into a business, you're bringing talent in with a view to retaining and growing. And if you're able to do those two factors, you will get what I call stickiness in the business. People will want to stay in the business because they enjoy working there, they enjoy working with the people within the business, they enjoy the kind of work that they're doing. It's no different from a localization perspective. If I look at our Saudi business, for example, we have a diverse business in terms of expats and locals, but embracing localization from hiring fee-earning colleagues, professional colleagues, well-educated, who have gone abroad and who have educated within the kingdom at the top universities, and who really want to pursue their careers with international organizations who will help them grow. And for me, I think if you embrace localization with the aim that there is no difference from a local or an expat. They're there based on merit, based on qualifications, based on experience, and based on wanting to grow within a business. And I think that is one of the recipes for success.
In Saudi Arabia in particular, but I think in other markets, we have more female graduates than male graduates. Is that being reflected in the recruitment of men versus women in the kingdom?
I suppose there is still room for improvement. And I think one thing we've noticed the same thing. So we're actually now implementing a graduate program. So how can you take talent, embrace talent directly from universities and bring them into the business? Historically, businesses such as ours have taken a different view to graduate programs, but over the last few years, and looking at how our offices in the US and Europe have succeeded with graduate intakes, we are now doing something similar here, and we've partnered up with 2 or 3 key universities in the region as we look to push graduate intake.
Now, Chris, if I can come to you, I mentioned in my opening comments that that one of the elements of having good equality, diversity, and inclusivity policies is attracting and retaining talent. I mean, is that the reality? Are you seeing, when you're trying to hire new staff, especially the younger generation, is this important to them?
It's absolutely important, Richard, and studies have shown, millennials particular. I have 2 millennial children. They are particularly interested in the credentials of an organisation around ED&I, around CSR. They do want a fairer work-life balance than probably my generation ever demanded or required or expected. So they will very much conduct a due diligence on the organisation. They would want to know where their organisation sits from an ED&I a sort of spectrum, and if they feel that either the leadership team or there are no programs in place, they absolutely will not join. And they do ask those questions at interview stage. Within our business, we do have established ED&I committees in every region. And in fact, my colleague Nurul is the chair of our ED&I committee here in the Middle East. So therefore, we do get asked those questions through the interview process. And as part of our onboarding program, so every new colleague who joins HKA will go through a full day onboarding program. They do get lots of information about the ED&I committee and how they can join and support and participate. So for us, it's actually a really strong selling point to attract talent to our business.
Excellent. And Haroon, if we move to the other end of the spectrum, so we're talking about hiring new joiners, but from the client point of view, how does this play out with your clients? Is it something they look for when they're selecting their consultants and contractors?
I think clients first and foremost do look for experience. They absolutely look that the CV, the people you are assigning to a specific role have the right experience. And if the experience is right, they certainly welcome diversity in the mix. I've seen that in Saudi Arabia, where we put forward a number of mixed teams, female and male, Saudi and non-Saudi, and clients absolutely appreciate that. So I think it certainly adds value from a client perspective.
Fantastic. Now, Nurul, I'm just going to sort of close this conversation by looking forward. You know, how can we make things change? So where do you see the best opportunities, and perhaps with your ED&I committee hat on, you know, where do you see the best opportunities for change and for better equality, diversity and inclusivity in the workplace in this region?
Okay, because we talk about gender representation in the construction industry, which is well known as a male dominated. So in order to create gender diverse and inclusive workspace, I think the most important thing that I would like to see is every organization to create a more inclusive workspace. Like, for example, construction site here in the Middle East still doesn't have, for example, a female toilet. It's just a simple thing, but if you want to attract more females, so you need to make it the environment more inclusive for them.
So it's not only about the policies, it's also about the details on the ground.
It's about the details. So if I can add to what Chris mentioned, I'm talking from the perspective of people if I want to apply for a job. So as a woman, as a female, so I don't want to be asked during the interview whether do you plan to have a family or do you plan to get pregnant. That sort of a question is very sensitive. It shows bias. So I would like to see more and more change in terms of this one, and also of course in terms of the female leadership, senior leadership position, because currently we don't see many female mentors in the industry. But in order to have that female mentors, we need to start from the bottom as well.
Well, Harun.
I was just going to say one thing about the industry. We've heard, and I'm sure you would have heard as well, Richard, people talking about the construction industry being male-dominated. And that may be the case, but I think that's not an excuse. That's not an excuse to promote diversity, not only in terms of gender, but ethnicity, background, race, etc. But if you do focus on gender, that is not an excuse, and it's really about the policies, procedures, culture that a company embraces that will help move away from this notion that certainly exists.
Well, thank you. I'm afraid that's all we're going to have time for today. I mean, we've just touched the tip of the iceberg, but thank you, Chris, Harun and Nurul, for your comments and your insight. As I said at the start of the discussion, attracting and retaining talent is one of the biggest and most important challenges for any company hoping to succeed in this region. And as we've heard in our discussion today, policies from the top down as well as operational procedures from the bottom up are all critical factors in delivering equality, diversity and inclusivity in the workplace. Thank you to my panelists today for this enlightening conversation. Thank you to you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.